This is an instructional build video on the KMX Venom Trike. You'll need to inspect your box to make sure there's no damage on the outside, and also make sure that everything is in your box. This is basically how your box should look when you receive the Trike. Your KMX kit will include front wheels, brakes, brake levers, handlebars, kingpin assemblies, ready to go on the Trike. The tie rod will already be attached to the left-hand wheel. There will also be a small parts box which will contain tools, bolts for the kingpin assemblies, the bolts for the tie rod, chain, pedals, zip ties, seat mounting brackets, a quick release for the rear wheel, assembly instructions, a flag, a rear fender, rear wheel, main frame, seat, front boom, crank, and front derailleur. Because this Trike is being sold as a kit, we're going to do the assembly with the tools provided. If you have tools at home, great. If not, this kit will provide you with everything you need to assemble your Trike. First, lay out everything next to the box and place the frame on top. Remove most of the packaging from the parts. I like to keep the frame mostly covered. We're going to begin with putting the left side wheel on. This should be the side with the tie rod. The bolts are in a bag, should look like that. There will be 2 M10 bolts. There will be 2 plastic caps, 4 thick flat washers, 4 bushings, and 2 M10 nuts. You'll start by taking 2 of the bushings, placing one in the lower hole facing down, one in the upper hole facing up, both on the inside of the kingpin. You can then slip it over the headset. Take an M10 bolt, slide a washer on, and then slip it down through the kingpin and headset. It may take a little bit of working to get everything to line up properly. But once you do, it should slip through fairly easily. Next, take another one of the flat washers, put it on the bottom side of the bolt, and then thread the nut onto the bottom of it. You'll next want to put on the right wheel. It's the same process as the left side. Just put in the bushings. You'll need to hold the top one in to keep it from falling out, and just slip it over the head tube. For this part, you'll need your wrench and the 8mm Allen. Slip the wrench onto the nut on the bottom side and begin tightening it down with the Allen. Once you've got it fairly tight, you can switch and use the short end, which will give you more leverage on the long end. The nuts are nylon lock nuts, so they should stay in place, but it's always a good idea to tighten up all bolts and nuts every week or two. The wheels should move pretty freely. Next, we'll attach the tie rod onto the right wheel. The tie rod assembly pieces should come in a bag that looks like this. You'll first take the long bolt and slip it through the tie rod end. And basically what you're going to do here is just copy the left-hand side. You'll first put on the small washer, followed by the thick spacer. You can then slip that into the kingpin. If it's stiff and won't go through, just thread it in as if you're twisting it into a nut. Put on the thick plastic washer, followed by the thick metal washer, and then the nylon lock nut. Make sure that both chain tubes are running underneath the tie rod. Once you've completed the headsets, you can put on the finishing caps. Those just slip into the hole in the top. The next step, you're going to carefully clip the zip ties that are holding the derailleur and housing to the right handlebar. There will also be 2 zip ties keeping the cable wound. You'll need to carefully clip those as well, making sure that you don't cut the housing. Next, you'll route the cable underneath the tie rod. There's also clips on the frame. Use these black clips to hold the cable housing in place. One thing that won't be mentioned in the instructions will be the derailleur hanger. You'll need to install this because we remove it during shipment to ensure that it doesn't break off and cause more problems for you later on. There will be the derailleur hanger and 3 small Phillips type screws. You just need to take your derailleur hanger, line it up on the back, and then thread in the screws. These screws may look very small, but you'll just need to use the number 2 Phillips blade screwdriver. You want to make sure that you just get these bolts snug and to ensure that you don't strip out the heads of any of the bolts. Next, we're going to install the rear wheel. The rear wheel will be separate from the quick release. There's 2 springs on the quick release, and you'll need to make sure that those go in the right places. Just twist off the one end and pull the spring with it. You notice that it's a cone shaped, and you'll need to make sure that you get the cone going the right direction. Slip the quick release in from the left side, or the brake side, so that the lever won't interfere with the derailleur if you ever have to take the wheel off or put it on. Just tighten down the opposite side. The wheel will just go in to the dropouts. You want to get the rear wheel snug, but you don't have to apply a lot of torque on it because your weight will keep the wheel in the dropout. Next, you'll use the 5mm Allen to install the rear derailleur on the rear derailleur hanger. Note that there's a little key on the derailleur and also a flat spot on the derailleur hanger, which that piece will rest against when you install it. Make sure that you don't cross thread the rear derailleur. Once you've tightened it down, the long shaft, you can switch to the short shaft, give yourself a little extra torque. As you can see, this cable has a lot of slack in it. There shouldn't be any showing. So you'll just use the 5mm Allen to loosen the cable retaining bolt, pull it down through as tight as you can. Tighten that back up. Also note that there's a lot of excess cable here. You can take a pair of cable cutters or wire cutters and clip off the excess cable. When you tighten the rear derailleur cable, you want to make sure that your bar end is flipped all the way forward. Next, you'll do boom installation. This boom has a triple crank with a front derailleur. You may need to loosen the bolts on the boom with the 5mm Allen before you can slip it in properly. The boom adjustment is part of how you'll get the length set up for you. So once you've got it into your desired length, go ahead and take your 5mm and snug the bolts down. Next, you'll need to cut the zip ties holding on the front derailleur cable. You'll want to run your front derailleur cable over the tie rod. The cable will run up through the bottom of the boom. Use your 5mm Allen to loosen the cable retaining bolt. You'll run the cable through the bottom side where it's flat. Also, when you tighten down your cable, make sure that your bar end is in the forward or flat position, which would be first gear. Next, we'll install the pedals. For this, I usually like to use some sort of lubricant or anti-seize compound for the threads. It's not necessary, but it's nice if you think you may want to remove the pedals and change them later. Backs of the pedals are stamped with left and right. Right refers to the side with the chain, or the drive side. Left, obviously, the non-drive side. What I like to do when I'm installing the pedals is fit the right one in, because it's standard thread. Clockwise, tighten, counterclockwise, loosen. So, if you're to hold the threads in place and rotate the crank backwards, it will thread the pedal. If you take the left hand pedal, which is left-handed thread, and do the same thing, it will also thread into the crank. Next, take the provided wrench, tighten down the pedals. Next, you're going to be installing the seat. Take the lower seat stays, move them up, and the upper seat stays should slide right over the lower ones. Slide it all the way down, and then take your seat attachment kit, and there will be the 2 seat stay bolts to keep the stays from sliding. Once you slip the upper seat stays over the lower seat stays, you can then line up the holes in the upper and lower seat stays and thread in the seat stay bolts. To attach the lower seat clamps, you want to pick up the trike, flip it upside down. For this part, you'll need the 4 shims, the 4 bolts, and the 4 plates. Notice that 2 of the plates are not threaded, and 2 of the plates are threaded. The threaded plates will go on the top of the seat, and the not threaded plates will go down here on the bottom of the frame. So firstly, take your threaded plates and slip them through the 2 slits on the seat frame. Next, take the bolts, slip them through the plates that aren't threaded, and slip the shims over those. You can then rest the plate and the shim over the frame, and then get the upper shim in place in between the black seat frame and the frame of the trike. So you get everything lined up, you can thread the bolts into the upper plates. Use your 5mm Allen to torque the bolts down. And take note that you don't have to apply a lot of torque to these bolts to keep the seat from moving. You want them snug, but not so tight that this bar is bending, otherwise it could damage the frame and the paint. Next, you'll be installing your rear fender. The screw should be already installed in the fender. You'll have to remove it. Open up the clamp, move the seat out of the way, it'll snap right on. Then take your smallest Allen wrench and just thread it in. The next step is trike adjustment. So what you want to do for the length is slide the boom in once you've gotten your seat into a position you like, and then put your heel on the pedal, and you want your knee to fully extend. That way when you're pedaling with your toe, you've got the proper amount of bend. And then once you've got it set up to where you want it, you can tighten them back down again. Make sure you don't put too much torque on these bolts, otherwise it could damage your boom. You just want enough so that it won't move around. While you're sitting in the trike, grab the handlebars, and they should be slightly loose. If not, the clamp for adjustment is down here near the wheel. Just loosen that bolt, and that will allow you to move the handlebars to where you want them. Once you've got the handlebars adjusted to where you like them, you can then tighten them down with the 5mm Allen. In the bag of chain, you'll find a master link and the chain itself. This may be a little bit confusing because in the picture they've got in the manual, the trike is upright, so it's a little hard to get the routing right, but do my best to show you.
Now the chain tube without the idler, that's just a solid piece, is the return chain tube. So that chain's going to come off the bottom of the derailleur. What we'll do, we're going to go ahead and just drop the chain through that tube first. Once you've got the chain run into the return tube to where you only have a little bit left, you can run it on the derailleur. Probably one of the easiest ways is to kick it forward, run the chain over that jockey wheel, down underneath the next one, once you've got that done, you can start running the chain through the power side chain tube. Now that you've fed the chain through the power tube, you can feed it into the idler underneath the chain keeper, then down into the next chain tube. Once you've got the chains run through the chain tubes, take the chain and loop it over itself to keep it from falling through the chain tube. You'll then want to set the trike upright. Once you've got the trike set back up on your box, take the chain that's running underneath the idler through the two separated chain tubes, run it through the front derailleur and over the smallest chain ring. This is where you're going to be changing the length of the chain. Take the lower chain in your other hand and bring it underneath the chain ring. When you move the lower chain underneath the chain ring, you should see your derailleur moving. The derailleur should sit in that position for proper adjustment. When sizing the chain, you want to note that right now both ends are the narrower piece of chain. So you want to keep that in mind when you're cutting it so that you can use a master link to splice it. You want to make sure that you're cutting the chain in such a way that you'll have one of those ends to use. A chain tool is the only tool that the KMX kit does not include that you will need. Open the pin, set the chain into the braking area, and press the pin out of the link. Try not to press the pin all the way out of the link. That way you will be able to re-splice the chain if you need to later. With your power chain run through the front derailleur and making sure that your turn chain isn't twisted in the chain tube, you can then use the master link to attach them. Take the chain, guide it up over the teeth of the largest chain ring while twisting the crank forward, and then pull it around the chain rings to put it in place. You may need to adjust the limiter screws on your rear derailleur. Now, the limiter screws may be in a different position on different models. We'll have a video up for pretty much every model. To align, you'll want to look down from above and line up 9th gear with that upper jockey wheel. As you rotate this screw out, just keep an eye on that jockey wheel and continue to rotate it out till it about lines up. As you can see, the factory adjustment on the brakes isn't quite up to par. What you'll need to do is adjust the caliper to accommodate for that extra pull. On this brake, you have an outer pad adjustment, and then inner pad adjustment is controlled by two barrel adjusters on the brake caliper and the brake lever. If you look down through the top, you can see light between the brake rotor and the brake pads. This will help you determine whether you want to adjust the inside pad or the outside pad. In this case, we are wanting to adjust the outside pad. So we're going to take our 5mm Allen, insert it into the outside of the brake caliper, and rotate it clockwise to tighten it. As you can see, that still hasn't quite provided enough pull, so we're going to adjust the inside pad as well. To do the alignment, you'll first need to loosen the 2 jam nuts on the tie rod. Now keep in mind that one of the tie rod ends does have left-handed threads, so you'll be able to rotate the tie rod and that will change the alignment of the trike. Take a tape measure, run it through the spokes of one side, and physically hook it on to a spoke on the opposite side. Measure off the spoke, and then go to the front and do the same thing. What you're looking to do is even out the distance between the front and the back of the trike. If it's off, just rotate the tie rod to get your proper alignment. Once you're done with that, you'll want to tighten the jam nuts back up. Each KMX comes with a flag mount. Simply release the quick release behind the nut. You're then ready to insert your flag. For derailleur adjustment, you use this inline adjuster. You just rotate it until there are no hesitations between the upper gear and the lower gear.